Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. So this session is designed to do two things. Um, One, to give you a little bit more time and space in order to compose your WA2, and to give you a little bit more time to catch up on the reading. So based on some of the questions I've asked y'all, or some of you whom I've asked, have said you're struggling to keep up with the reading. Um, so that's the idea here, along with giving me a chance to just kind of walk you through a template of WA2. Um, so what I'm going to try to do is keep this short so that I'm not going on and on, but try to make this as useful as possible. Now, that said, in terms of reading cosmopolitanism, you don't need to go beyond chapter 6. All right. That said, there are a couple of potentially useful concepts in chapters 8 and 9. For example, one of the concepts talked about is just simply, well, whose culture, who owns a given culture, right? Who are the stakeholders and who owns cultural artifacts? So that's, I think, one question there. Okay, I had to pause the recording real quick, so I'm going to try and pick up where I left off, which I already forget where I am. So awesome. Uh, okay, so if you walk through the assignment, you'll notice that I've provided you with a list of cultural misunderstandings and spirit. So I mentioned possibly reading to chapter 6 in cosmopolitanism, um, but I also provided you with a list of um, concepts from cosmopolitanism as well. So such as, well, cosmopolitanism itself, conversation, universal concern slash obligation, respect for cultural differences slash particularity, positivism, the Duhem thesis, thin, I guess I put think ethical concepts. Of course, that's thin and thick. Um, and you might think about, the universal concern slash obligation. You might even bring back or explore Kant's universal maxim or something along those lines. So what I would recommend you do is see if I can share my screen real quick here. Are we here? Okay, yeah. So here's a template, very basic. What I would do if I were you is begin actually with a concept rather than a series of misunderstandings, and simply read up on that concept in cosmopolitanism. All right, so for example, here I've chosen the thick and thin categories, or you might call them epistemologies, systems of knowledge and the like. And here's a sample thesis. So by explicating the concept of thick and thin categories and applying it to, and here you might put in your specific misunderstanding from the spirit catches you and you fall down. I will show how these cultural misunderstandings might be overcome, might be mitigated. Okay, something along those lines. Remember, we're not trying to prove anything, right? This is a thesis. You're trying to marshal evidence in support of a claim, not trying to prove anything. Okay, so that's key there. Now, in terms of just where you're going to, or how far to read in spirit, I would suggest chapters 9, 10, 11, 12, or thereabouts, because you really get the crux of the story. You'll be introduced to the Hmong and their long history, their conflict with the Chinese, which apparently happened over centuries. And you'll be introduced, of course, to Leah as well, and her condition, her epilepsy, which leads to seizures. So if it's me, I would choose a concept from cosmopolitanism, explore that concept in your intro, and then dive into and search through Spirit Catches You for instances of these misunderstandings. All right, so here I have this intro. Of course, we're asking, always asking and always thinking about what makes an ideal intro. In this case, what you're trying to do is offer context, right? So you might begin by introducing The Spirit Catches You, or by introducing cosmopolitanism and getting to the concepts, moving on to introduce the other book, and then you might talk a little bit about how they're in conversation with one another, and if not in conversation, then how they might be linked, or how cosmopolitanism might have certain concepts that might allow you to examine key conflicts in The Spirit Catches You. Um, that context here is key, followed by, I mean, somewhere there should be the key claim that you're making. And then, as I mentioned, the roadmap, right? This paper will examine 3 different scenes in The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. As an alternative, I was also going to say, you could also think about doing, one question I had from one of you was, I don't know if I can write for 4 pages on one concept from cosmopolitanism. One thing you might want to do is just analyze 3 distinct concepts, and that would be fine with me. It's beyond the scope and kind of the design, but essentially it's whittling, focusing in on the key part of this assignment and just simply doing it 3 times. So that would be acceptable to me as well. All right, so this is the WA2 template. All right, I'm going to move on and have a look at, let's see here. All right, I'm going to reshare this screen and have a look at a sample intro that Mackenzie has kindly provided. Ignore the email from the Gap. Thank you. Ignore the email from a senior colleague who just sort of rained all over one of my suggestions for marketing materials for the English department. Okay, let's have a look at Mackenzie's. All right. Okay, so here's her intro. Being able to empathize with others can be hard, but being able to empathize with others of a different culture can be even harder. So we have an opening of a fairly general statement, maybe overgeneral, but not bad, right? Not only do you have to account for the person themselves, but you also have to think about where they come from and their cultural morals, which can be just extremely difficult. And The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down by Anne Fadiman. American doctors are unable to properly empathize with Leah Lee and her family because of their cultural differences. Since the Lees immigrated to Merced, California from the country of Laos, there was a huge cultural clash between the American and Hmong cultures. In this paper, I will be discussing how the idea of cosmopolitanism could help with the cross-cultural understanding of how you should take care of your health. Okay, so a couple things here. One, I think we get a reasonable amount of context, but that said, I would ask Mackenzie to be more specific here. So what in cosmopolitanism will you be examining? Which key concept or concepts? 2, here we're not talking about how you should take care of your health, right? That's not the purpose of the paper, but rather to show how one concept can try to mitigate or overcome cultural barriers, cultural misunderstandings, etc. Right? So I think as a start, this is a really reasonable intro to me. I think you could probably expand this description as well, right? Well, empathize with Leah Lee, what specifically is happening here, right? And you could introduce this by talking about her seizures, what cultural differences specifically come up in The Spirit Catches You. Well, the Hmong believe in a fairly robust spirit world, and you might mention, how living in the wrong hut might lead to medical conditions because the hut's buried or built on top of a buried body, how the not disposing of the placenta properly might lead to these conditions. The little neck strings, I forget what they're called, being cut might lead to these right. So talking a little bit about the humong idea of just how much our physical world is influenced by the spiritual world. So something along those lines. And what son of a, oh, I had a second one here. Okay, that's really obnoxious. Let's see if that's my surface for you. Okay, I had one open already. Didn't see that. Okay, so hopefully this is kind of a recipe for where to begin, how to proceed. Once you have your intro, you also have an outline for your paper as well, right? You have the three scenes or the three parts that you'll be examining. You have the key concept or concepts from cosmopolitanism, and you have a rough outline of the rest of your paper. All right. So that said, I will see you all on Friday. Hopefully this was time well spent for you, especially for those of you, and I'm guessing probably 1/3 to 1/2 of you had some issues. So I will see you on Friday. Please bring your intros and have those finished, and so that we can kind of proceed step by step. All right. Thanks, y'all.